So the Vidhan Parishad is also known as the Legislative Council, as you can see here, and it is also known as the upper house. Plus you should also remember that it is a permanent house which cannot be dissolved or ended, as well as it also has a fixed strength of maximum and minimum people. So the maximum number of members who form a part of Vidhan Sabha, they are 1/3 members of the total members of Vidhan Sabha. And the minimum number of members of Vidhan Parishad is 40 members. Then 1/3 members of the Vidhan Parishad retire after the duration of 2 years, and then the elections are being held for the vacant seat. Then its presiding officers are chairman and deputy chairman. The deputy chairman has similar functions like deputy speaker, means that when the chairman is not present in the meetings, then the deputy chairman has to take his place and play the important role and the vital role in performing his powers in the absence of chairman. So let's go through quickly through these points, that the maximum number of members of Vidhan Parishad is the 1/3 members of the total number of members of Vidhan Sabha, and the minimum number of members is 40. Whereas if you remember, in case of Vidhan Sabha, the maximum number of members in Vidhan Sabha is 500 and minimum is 60. And in some exceptional cases, like in the state of Goa, Nagaland, Mizoram and Sikkim, the number of members varies between 30 to 40. Plus, the members are fixed, as this is a permanent house and it cannot be dissolved or ended. Therefore, the strength also remains fixed. Then after a period of 2 years, 1/3 members of the Vidhan Parishad, they retire, and then for their vacant seats, elections are held. And lastly, in case of Vidhan Sabha, if you remember, the presiding officers are the speaker and the deputy speaker, whereas in the case of Vidhan Parishad, the presiding officers of the meetings are chairman and deputy chairman. The chairman enjoys the position of the chairman as the presiding officer in Vidhan Parishad as long as he has the confidence of the majority members of the Parishad. But he can also be removed if the majority members of the Parishad, they vote against him. He can also be removed and changed. And normally and generally, the chairman is the presiding officer of the Vidhan Parishad, and he is elected among the members of the Parishad only. Now, what are the certain eligibilities of becoming the member of Vidhan Parishad? First of all, he or she should be a citizen of India, which is the first and foremost requirement to become any government authority or to hold any position in a government's or state office. Secondly, he or she should be at least of 30 years of age. Then the person becomes eligible to become a member or stand for the position of the member of Vidhan Parishad. And next, there are some other qualifications also which are required by the parliament or the central government, which have to be fulfilled by the aspiring person to become the member of Vidhan Parishad. Now, there are certain number of people from different sectors of the state who vote for the members of the Vidhan Parishad. As children, the Vidhan Parishad members are not directly elected by the people, just like the case of Vidhan Sabha. If you remember, the members of the Vidhan Sabha, they are directly elected by the people of the state, but here it does not apply. Here the members of the Vidhan Parishad are not directly elected by the people, whereas they are elected by different other governmental bodies or authorities, which I'll show you here. Okay, so let's understand that how and by whom the members of the Vidhan Parishad are elected. I'll make a pie chart over here to make you understand the ratio and the proportion. Okay. Alright. So, 1/3 members of Vidhan Parishad, they are elected by the Electoral College consisting of district boards, municipal committees and other local self-governments. Here I am only writing the name of municipal committees because I have mentioned the rest to you orally. Now, 1/3 members. The rest of the 1/3 members of Vidhan Parishad, they are elected by the members of Vidhan Sabha. Then 1/6 members of the Vidhan Parishad, they are nominated by the state governor. Then 1/12 members of the Vidhan Parishad are elected by the teachers who are teaching in either higher secondary schools or colleges of the states for 3 years or more. Then the last left over 1/12 portion of the members of the Vidhan Parishad is elected by the graduates of the state. So you see that these many people are involved in choosing the members of the Vidhan Parishad. We can also say that the members of the Vidhan Parishad are indirectly chosen by the people of the state. Whereas the members of the Vidhan Sabha, they are elected and chosen directly by the people. Now, the Vidhan Sabha members are chosen by the directly by the people, and these members of Vidhan Sabha, they select whom? The members of the Vidhan Parishad. So we are indirectly choosing our Vidhan Parishad and directly we are choosing our Vidhan Sabha. So let's again quickly go through it. 1/3 members of the Vidhan Parishad are elected by the district boards, municipal committees and other local self-governments. Then the rest of the 1/3 members of Vidhan Parishad are chosen by or elected by Vidhan Sabha members. Then 1/6 members of Vidhan Parishad are elected by state governor. 1/12 are elected by the teachers who have been teaching for 3 years or more in the state colleges and schools, and the last 1/12 portion of the members of Vidhan Parishad are elected by the graduates of the state. Now children, as it is mentioned in your chapter, there are 2 types of list given, namely the state list and the concurrent list. So first let's know what is the state list. So a state list consists of total 66 subjects or topics or sectors of the society, that is within the boundaries of the state and its people, over which the state legislature has complete right to make laws or change the existing laws. The topics can vary from economic to social, as well as the topics of society and daily lives of the people. For example, they cover up the sectors of economy like job, profession, agriculture, then banking, then they also cover up health and education, infrastructural growth of the state. Then they also cover up the safety and security measures of the people of the state. So there are total 66 subjects which are mentioned in the state list on which the state legislature can make its laws, and only state legislature has the right to do so. And second one is concurrent list. Now, what happens in a concurrent list? Concurrent list is comparatively a longer list which has even more other topics to be covered, which can include the border security, the army, the welfare and the monetary economy, and the arms and ammunitions, weapons, as well as related to the banking and other requirements of the people of the whole country. But there are 47 such subjects over which the state government can imply or enact its laws. And the concurrent list is a little different from the state list, because in the state list only the state legislature or the state government has the right to imply or apply its laws, whereas in concurrent list the state government as well as the union or the central government has the right to make and change its existing or make its new laws. Plus, you also have to keep in mind that in the making of the laws in the concurrent list, suppose there are 47 such topics over which the state government can make laws, right? Suppose if the central government as well as the state government have made similar laws over the same topic, then that law which will prevail, which is made by the central government or the union government. Alright, now apart from these functions, the state legislature also has to perform some non-legislative functions. For example, it has the right to ask questions regarding the provision of solving of the problems of the people of the state. From whom? From the Council of Ministers. Now, if you remember, the Council of Ministers, they are situated at the Parliament and they consist of two houses. The upper house known as the Raj Sabha and the lower house known as the Lok Sabha. Okay, now I told you that the state legislature has various legislative as well as non-legislative functions, but they also have certain limitations. I told you that the state legislature can make laws over 66 subjects under the state list, and they can enact laws on 47 topics under the concurrent list unless and until it clashes with the laws made by the central government over the same topic. So, if suppose they make a law on any topic out of these two lists and it is not in the interest of the majority number of people of the state, then the governor of the state has the right to send it to the president of the country for his approval, and if the president rejects it, then it is dead for once and all. Means that law is not at all applicable from there onwards. And this position applies to all the items or all the subjects which are mentioned in both the concurrent as well as the state list. So this was all about the state legislature, and now we come to the next portion, that is the state executive. So I am going to tell you about the state executive, who is the governor. Now, what points you have to remember about the governor? First of all, he is the nominal head of state. Okay, governor is the nominal head of state. Then he is appointed by the President of India, and he can also be removed, and can also be removed by the advice of whom? The Prime Minister. Alright. Then third point is that the governor is appointed for a term of 5 years. So what are the features of the state executive, that is the governor? First of all, the governor is the nominal head of the state. Then secondly, he is appointed by the President of India and can also be removed by the President on the advice of Prime Minister, and he is appointed for a total time period of 5 years. Now there are certain qualifications which are required for a person to become a governor. The first one is that he should be a Indian citizen. This is the first and foremost requirement of any person who wants to join the government of India, that he or she should be an Indian citizen. Second one, he or she should be at least of 35 years of age. Okay. Then third one is, if he or she is a part of any other government post such as the state legislature or any other governmental post, then he has to resign from it in order to become the governor. Alright. And last one says he or she cannot hold any office of profit of government at any level. It just simply means to say that to become a governor, a person has to completely resign from all the rest of the positions and has to concentrate on his job solely. Alright, so let's quickly go through it once again. To become the governor, there are certain eligibilities required. So first qualification is that the person should be an Indian citizen. Second, that he or she should be at least of 35 years of age. Then, in order to become the governor, if the person is holding any position of minister or he or she is a part of state legislature or state legislative assembly, then he has to resign from that post and completely accept the sole position of governor only. Then lastly, he or she cannot hold any profit of government at any level. Now, as you know that the governor also has certain powers which are divided into 3 parts: the judicial powers, the executive powers and the legislative powers. I am going to tell you some powers or some functions of the governor out of the all, because there are so many in number, so I will be enlisting down only few of them. Okay, so the first function of the governor is that he addresses the opening session of session of the State Legislative Assembly. Then second, he causes to present the state budget or the budget of the state in Vidhan Sabha. Next function is he can choose the leader of the majority party, that is the CM or the Chief Minister. He has the right to choose the leader of the majority party of the Vidhan Sabha, that is the CM or the Chief Minister. Then he can also appoint other ministers of the Council of Ministers on CM's or Chief Minister's recommendation. If it is recommended by the Chief Minister, then the Governor can also appoint the other ministers of the Council of Ministers at larger level, at the parliamentary or central level. Lastly, he also preserves the right to pardon or forgive the culprit on the basis of mercy petition. Petition is a request letter asking the government or the judiciary to fulfill any certain request. If it is a culprit or a criminal and his crime is not so big and major and can be pardoned in certain exceptional situations, then his mercy plea or mercy petition can be approved by the government and he can also be pardoned or forgiven and saved from the punishment that has to be given to him. And lastly, the governor can also change death penalty to life imprisonment. Life imprisonment means when a criminal or a person is given the punishment of being in prison or jail for lifelong till he dies naturally on his own. So, these are the certain legislative, executive and judicial powers of the governor. Legislative means where he can make the laws, executive means where he can apply the laws, and judicial means where he can decide or give the verdict on any case or on the criminal or culprit. So the first two is, he addresses the opening session of the State Legislative Assembly and he can present the state budget in Vidhan Sabha. So this is two of the legislative powers of the governor that I have mentioned here out of the various functions that he have. Then we come to the next two functions which are from the executive power of the governor. He can choose the leader of the majority party of the state as the chief minister. And then he can also appoint other ministers of the Council of Ministers on the recommendation of Chief Minister. And lastly, two judicial powers. He can pardon the culprit on mercy petition or forgive him. And lastly, he can also change the death penalty. That is, if any crime or any criminal has done something for which he has been given the punishment of death, it can also be changed to lifetime imprisonment. He cannot come out of the prison. He will stay forever in the prison if he pleads for it or in certain exceptional cases. So these were some of the functions of the governor. So children, till here we have covered up about the State Legislative Assembly, the state, the ministers, their working, their functions, the legislative as well as the executive powers, about the governor. Now we are left with the last topic, that is the Chief Minister, who is the head of the state. What are his some important functions and powers? I'm going to tell you in a brief manner. Okay children, so now we'll briefly discuss about the Chief Minister. A Chief Minister is elected by the MLAs, and after the elections, the leader of the majority ruling party is invited by the governor to form the government as the Chief Minister of the state, and he is the head of the state. He coordinates and looks after the functioning and working of all the departments and sees the growth as well as the welfare and progress of the whole state and its people. Now the Chief Minister is a very vital role in the proper functioning of the state and the maintenance and development of the whole cities of the whole state. Now there are some important functions that has to be performed by the Chief Minister, which I will be listing down here. Alright children, so here I have written down some of the functions of the Chief Ministers, though there are more functions than what I have mentioned here, but let's go through it now. First is formation of ministry. So the Chief Minister has the details of all of his colleagues who are working with him as political ministers, and he can choose whom to include in the Council of Ministers. Then coordination among ministers. This is very important for efficient and smooth functioning in any organization, be it institutional, be it educational or political. So the Chief Minister has a vital role in maintaining the coordination and cooperation among the working of the ministers, and he also has to see that none of the ministers create any kind of problematic situation and the work goes on without any hurdles. Next is presiding over meetings. As it is very well clear that he is the head of the state, so he has to be there at the meetings, and no minister can dare to oppose the views of the Chief Minister, as his views are considered as the supreme in the matters of state. Next, he has the power to dissolve a legislative assembly. He can advise the governor to dissolve the legislative assembly as and when it is required according to the circumstances and situation, and therefore the governor has to abide by the advice of the Chief Minister. And lastly, appointment. It means that all the posts of the ministers that have to be appointed in the Council of Ministers, they undergo or they go through the hands of the Chief Minister. Under his supervision, the appointments are being made. And therefore, we can say that the Chief Minister plays a vital role in the building and functioning of the state. It is in his hands that whether the state develops or go backwards. So these were some of the functions of the Chief Minister, and here we wrap up the chapter.